This is a video to show you the differences between the seat cushion base spring units for the Triumph TR2, TR3, TR3A, 3B and some of the TR4 models. There are 3 different versions of springs offered for these different models of cars. So starting with this one here, this is for the TR2 and the TR3 models. So going up to around 22,000 before they switch to the TR3As. So it's a spring unit made up of coils. They're all made by us in the UK, unlike a couple of different variants out there made in Asia. No names mentioned. So it's all coils put together on a framework. We've been making these exact same ones for decades, long before I took charge from my father. And we have the correct rigidity of spring in there. So you can see it's quite firm, but it does allow you to contract that. If you notice some of the other aftermarket ones made in Asia, if you press down on them like that, they wobble all over the place, which in my opinion is just not safe. So just bear that in mind. Ours are slightly more expensive, but they are much higher quality. Keep that in mind. On the TR2 and TR3, this is the correct way up, as it were. So you'll see, if I go over top like that, looking down, the top part is wider, etc., around these corners here, and then it dips down in. So this is where your bum goes basically on this part here, and this is in the framework here. So bear that in mind. That is the correct formation for the TR2 and TR3s. You might have to kind of wrestle them to get them into the frame, to get them to sit correctly in the bottom, but they do work absolutely fine. And the idea being that obviously on the TR2s and TR3s, the horseshoe border of the cushion sort of overhung and then came tapered back in on the bottom. It's also worth noting the covers are, strictly speaking, different between the TR2s and TR3s. Again, several aftermarket suppliers out there lump them all together. This is not correct. The TR2s, the piping on the cushion border effectively stayed on the perimeter of the spring right there. Whereas the TR3s, it came round and then it kind of dipped slightly further down and then came back up again. The reason for this being that basically, if you imagine on the TR2s, piping, it would go right underneath where you bend your knee. So 2 problems with that. 1, it's a bit annoying. It would sort of rub on the back of the inside of your knee. And 2, it would wear away the seat cover a bit quicker. So they quickly switched to having this dip slightly further down. The spring's the same, it's just the way you trim it. So bear that in mind. So that's the TR2, TR3. You then have the TR3A. Very similar in look, but if you look down on it, it holds much of the same curvature shape. So it didn't have this sort of ear over the top. If I turn this one upside down, you'll be able to see the difference there. It doesn't have these sort of ears coming around on it. Apart from that, the principle of it is exactly the same on that there. So that's the TR3A. The TR4s, the first few cars, TR4s, they used exactly the same seat covers as the TR3As. And with that, the same seat frames and thus the same seat spring units. Then they switched the cover style. Instead of having horizontal pleats, they switched to vertical pleats. This is what we refer to as the TR4 early. These seat covers are extremely rare, but they use the same seat frame as the TR3A, barring one crucial difference. If you turn this upside down, you see? Got like a tabletop on it. And obviously that's the opposite way around. It actually recessed into the frame. So thing to look out for, because they do get mixed up. One, on the original production lines they did it, but also in the aftermarket. If your TR3A seat frame, for the sake of argument, is flat at the very bottom of the frame, then you want this TR3A version. If your TR3A seat frame, or TR4 obviously, with the TR3A style, was recessed, so it had a square recess in the bottom of the frame about there, that dipped into, then that is the correct seat spring for that version of the car. So just bear that in mind. We're one of the only companies, if not the only company in the world, certainly to manufacture that style, but to supply that style. And it just basically, it gave you an extra bit of oomph, shall we say, to allow you to press down on it. So just bear that in mind. Just one of the extra lamps that we at John Skinner's go to keep conformity with originality. See our website for more details.